welcome to Lea County Pod. We're here today and we are going to do a little bit something different. We're going to be critiquing one poem. Pete, would you please go ahead and introduce our poem today?
Yes, Jack. The poem is titled Rodeo, and it's the next to last poem in Suzanne Cleary's book, The Odds, winner of the Laura Bass Poetry Foundation Award for 2024. And it's a poem that starts out by talking about an Aaron Copland opera and ends by talking about apples sold at a roadside stand.
Okay.
A lot happens in between.
Why don't you go ahead and read that for us?
There are better ways to do this, but I listened to Copland's ballet on a car radio in the foothills of the Catskills, driving the long way home for no reason I know, other than to see gold leaves, old orchards, and horse farms, weekend homes of the wealthy who drive up from Manhattan Friday night and head back Monday at sunrise, which is this movement. Violins like footsteps across grass, violas and cellos poised to follow, to reach and sway like something stretching awake. The composer conjures morning when I most need morning, late afternoon in early November. The two-lane road winds in and out of the music which, when I cannot hear it, seems gone entirely, before it rises again, weaving through the broadcast from another station on which listeners argue about a quarterback benched for a penalty. They debate the referee's call so loudly it seems that they, too, hear rodeo building to crescendo, so they raise their voices before the hills absorb them, as the hills will absorb each of us eventually. It is hard not to think of my dead. It is hard to believe that around the next curve the music will resume, not where it left off, but from where it never left off, from where it keeps playing, inside this cold earth, its late fruits, Macintosh and Granny Smith and Rome, and crates at the side of the road, free for the taking.
Thank you, Pete. What I find interesting about this poem is that, number one, it takes multiple readings to get the real meat out of it. On the surface, you have a traveler. Your scene shifts from one element to another. The fact that she references Aaron Copland, the American composer, is unique in my opinion, because, again, if you're familiar with that particular composer, he is the essence of Americana. His music describes the grandiose landscape of the North American continent. And so to incorporate his ballet Rodeo into the piece itself, it is an integral part of the narrative, because the narrator is driving through the Catskills. There's the sense of loss, familial loss, and returning home after a funeral. A lot of people have done this, and a lot of people are driving alone. She's driving alone. The narrator is driving alone in their vehicle, and they're listening to the radio, and the radio fades in and out. There is such an ambience to this piece that multiple readings bring out the little details of the journey as you pass through from one phase to the next. And you lose the thread of the piece, if you will, as the music fades in and out between the hills and the mountains that you're weaving through. And that is part of the journey. So again, Pete, what's your thought on that?
Well, one thing, I remember when we first talked about this poem, and I stand corrected, it is the last poem in Suzanne's book. I have read the book twice, and I may have started writing a review of it, but Rodeo was one of the poems, for me, I like to think of it as the densest poem in the book, although not to say others are not, but I had questions about it, which I brought to you, and you seemed to really illuminate some things for me, which deepened my appreciation for the poem. Because I wasn't quite sure how the opera connected to the rest of the poem. I didn't really feel grounded in it. And you know, one thing that we note is the narrator in the poem, as you use that term, the person speaking is also a driver. That's her role in the poem, and upon reflection, I noticed how driving is the last word in the first, what I would call, I'd call it a tercet, a three-line stanza, but they are tiered unevenly. They look different on the page from something that would be where the left margin would just be neatly aligned, and I looked that up. It said a triadic line, poetry or step line, is a long line which unfolds into three descending and indented parts. Well, at the end of the first one, we have that word driving, which sets us in motion, and I got to thinking that for the driver speaker, the windshield becomes a medium. And so it's not only what she's hearing, but what she's seeing. Mm-hmm. And what she's seeing out the windshield. And just as that is a medium between her and the outside world, she's the medium, the speaker's the medium between us and the poem, let's say. There's that connection. So it's very interesting for what we hear and what we see. And of course, bringing the apples in involves other sense perceptions. But she says one thing here at the end, at the beginning of the third, fourth, fifth, sixth three-line stanza, I'll call it, like something stretching awake. Violins like footsteps across the grass. I'd never seen or heard of that comparison before, and I say see because we get a mental picture of the violins, the footsteps, the grass. Violas and cellos poised to follow, to reach and sway like something stretching awake. Maybe it's just me, but it makes me think of a hand reaching up to a branch to grab an apple from the tree. I think it's just that something stretching awake does that to me. And then she says, of course, the composer conjures morning here in the late afternoon and early November. But for her, the music makes her think of a morning.
Yeah.
Very interesting time-wise, too.
Again, you have disparate elements being woven together in this journey that we take along with the narrator in the poem. What do you think? You just mentioned one. What other elements that initially may seem to be, well, they don't belong, but after you think about it, they actually do. You sort of have that feeling upon the first reading of it.
Thinking again of not only what we hear but what we see, the narrator says the road winds in and out of the music. Well, it's really the driver who's winding in and out of it as she winds around curves and bends in the road. Figuratively speaking, she is the road. The person and the place become one, in a sense, and they're at one with the music. And where is this again, with the music weaving in and out of the road here? But I just thought that was interesting. The music comes and goes and gets woven into a broadcast of listeners arguing about a penalty for a quarterback in the game. All of a sudden, the radio channel has shifted, and the speaker didn't do that. And I think it's something that we can relate to, especially if you're in a remote area. Maybe you're losing a signal, and the radio station will all of a sudden become another radio station. Well, she's gone from the opera to the sports station, and these people loudly arguing, which she likens to the building crescendo in the Copeland Opera, which is really, again, the whole poem is just so original, and the comparisons she makes and all. I've never seen anything quite like it.
I think that is a key element, is the fact that, again, it's something that the average reader the average reader probably has experienced that crossfade of you're moving out of range of one station and into the range of another station, and there's that crossfade and static that occurs, and then, and maybe only briefly, you latch onto this signal that wasn't there, that you really didn't want to listen to or hear about, and then it interrupts your journey for however brief of a moment. It's an interruption to what you were doing and what you were thinking and what you were feeling. It becomes that interruption that grabs you for a moment, and you deal with it, and then you come back to the original signal. You come back to the original road, if you will. You come back to being settled down and where you were at before. I think that says a bit about how we experience loss sometimes, is that our loss is heartfelt. Death is a tragedy, but life does go on. And we have to return to a path that is stable if we're going to move forward. And I think, in a way, Suzanne has captured that feeling of being lost in one moment, but regaining your footing in the next. And I think that as the story moves on to where we see the apple crates by the side of the road, that's our fulfillment. That's the fruit of the journey, is that we've come through the mountains, we've come through the hills, and there is this payoff at the end that if we would just stop long enough to recognize it, we can have it in our hands, and it's free for the taking. That's just a thought right there. What do you think about that?
She says towards the end something about where the music will resume not where it left off, but from where it never left off. The music, of course, has been going on the whole while. She herself, the speaker, driver, just temporarily lost it. And it's an interesting thing to ponder. And I had said something in writing some notes up about this poem, about the continuity of art, or the continuous, the undisrupted aspect of art. For example, the Copland opera exists just like Shakespeare's Hamlet exists, and it's there to be, in this case, heard by listeners, and that will always be until something catastrophic might happen to wipe art off the face of the earth. We hope not, but it's a little bit like nature. The apples on the tree will fall, but in spring they'll come again. That perennial thing of art and nature. We, on the other hand, are going to be absorbed by the hills, figuratively speaking, as that sound was for a moment where she lost it. But other listeners will come and hear Copland's opera. All of that is there, and if someone were to say to me, gee, what does this poem mean? I say, well, it's all on the page. I don't know if I'm being clear about that. It means exactly what it says. I personally am taking things from it as you have, and the things we take are very similar. I think one of the real strong points of this poem is how Suzanne Cleary is able to take a situation that seems, I don't know if idiosyncratic is the right word, but just something, anybody who has driven a motor vehicle and listened to the radio and been in a situation like that, especially in a topography with hills, where we lose a Wi-Fi signal momentarily, something like that. It's something a lot of people can relate to, but she takes a situation like that and makes it art, really, makes it poetry, and I think by things she suggests about human beings, nature, and art itself, and I think that's the real strength of the poem for me. How she's able to take something very personal and make it, what's the word I'm looking for, universal, something
Yes.
very subjective and objectify it, and do it in language that's very economical, yet very eloquent at the same time.
I think I would have to throw in another word, is that this particular poem is accessible, okay? You can, it doesn't take a great deal to understand what's going on, because it is a story poem. It tells a story. And the thing about it is that you may not know Aaron Copland, but if you don't know about Aaron Copland, you can go look him up. You can go Google him and learn about what he's done in his life. And so if you don't know about certain things, you can find out about them. If these things are strange to you, you can search, you can knock, you can seek and find. And I think that's what this poem actually is. It's very accessible. It's very easy to find out. There are things I know that I didn't know, but I went and looked up what rodeo actually was. I was like, oh, now I see. I understand this is a Copland ballet opera, and it's very much a huge part of Americana, and it fits when you're listening to, say, the Philharmonic Symphony on public radio. It's one of these things that you can see happening. And the average reader can see this as they read the poem. They can see this coming alive inside of their head.
And when she says free for the taking, that also applies to a work of art. You know,
Yes.
If one wants to be in the presence of that work of art or access it, you know, the Copland Opera, a painting in a museum, a play, as it's written on the page or performed on the stage, free for the taking in that sense. It will be there for us.
This is true. And I think, again, the aspects of free for the taking is the experience. And once you have the experience, not only is it free for the taking, but it's also something that cannot be taken from you.
Ah, yeah.
I think that's another important element. And that's what poetry does. It gives us an experience that when we begin to understand it, it cannot be taken from you. The stories, the narratives, the imagery. That's one of the things that poetry can and will do, is that it will give you an experience, even if it's vicarious. It's still an experience that is unique to you, the reader. And I think that Rodeo achieves that. I think in her book, The Odds, Suzanne Cleary has achieved that in almost every instance of each piece that she has included in this work. And that's where I pretty much have.
If there's any one part of this poem that she labored over more than others, I don't know what that part would be. And I think that's as it should be. She's given us a real polished, finished work. And one thing that struck me in regard to all of the poems in this book is how individual they are. No one poem is a repeat of the other or a variation of the other, but they're all very particular. And the last poem in Suzanne Cleary's book, I think, is a good case in point. You know, read other poems where people have talked about hearing things on the radio in a motor vehicle, but never a poem quite like this, where she takes what's playing on the radio and makes so much out of it, really.
Yes, well, the Copland Ballet is pretty much almost the main character here.
Ah, yeah.
Okay, this is the introduction to the journey. Main character that flows through the entire piece, whether it's up front or in the background, it's still there by the time we come to the end of the poem. The music is still playing, even when we get to the apples. The music, for me at least, is still playing. The ballet is still running. The song, the music, it's It doesn't end just because we come to the fruit of it.
Right.
Okay. Any other thoughts before we conclude this?
One other, perhaps, how there's such a difference between the opera and the sports network, with the listeners arguing about the quarterback being penalized, yet here again the poet manages to forge a sameness, linking the cadence of their collective voices to the crescendo in Copland's opera, something so different. Radio channels that are so different, finding a likeness in them.
Yes. And again, the whole switching of the channel, the you could say almost acrimony of the sportscaster. Becoming that distraction, if you will, becoming that interruption. It's the contrast to that journey. It's the hiccup in the road, you could say. So I think that pretty much covers the highlights of Rodeo. Go ahead and check out Suzanne Cleary's book, The Odds, where you will find the rodeo in, along with a host of other great poetry. Thank you so much for your time, and we'll do this again soon. Once again, this is Jack Campbell and Pete Melidnick, Lea County Pod. Everybody have a great day.